Hi, everybody. This is Arthi from Human Chapters. I'll tell you a little bit about human chapters. Humans are living narratives with a past, present, and future. These narratives constitute of a number of chapters across a lifespan. The aim of these conversations is to highlight a chapter of the narrative and unpack its connections to other chapters. I don't care whether people are natural storytellers, but I truly do believe each one of us has a worthy story to share. In acknowledgement to country, we acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we are. We pay respect to their tribal elders, past and present and emerging. We celebrate the continuing culture and we acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. Today, we are going to be speaking to Angie about her chapter, Anything is Possible. Welcome, Angie. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, Artie. First, just thank you so much for the opportunity to be on here. I love what you do, so I'm kind of very giddy, a little bit of a fangirl moment right now that
Oh,
I'm even
yeah.
getting to meet with you. So thank you. But my name's Angie Hanlin. I am an educational consultant. Recently, I've become a full-time educational consultant. I've just started a company called Angela Hanlin and Associates, getting that up off the ground right now. I've been in education over 25 years. That and my family, those are my two passions in my life. I'm from Wisconsin. I've lived about 4 years now in Wisconsin. Work took me there. Prior to that, I've lived my whole life in Missouri. And right now, because I have a new grandson in Missouri, I'm kind of spending about half my month in Missouri and half my month in Wisconsin. So tonight I'm actually joining you from Missouri. So that's a little about me. And I'm thrilled to be with you. And before I begin, if I can just quickly say, I not only love what you do, I've listened to so many of your episodes, but I love that it's called Human Chapters because I agree that we do all have these chapters that make up and lead to our story, and everyone has a story. And the thing I love about your program is you've interviewed some people that I feel like I know really well. But then I'll hear this and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that part about them, more about their story, more about their chapter. So I just love what you do and I'm so honored and really humbled to be with you tonight. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Angie, for those kind words. Yeah, we do have a story, and it's really important. We have a platform to share
Yeah.
these stories and share them deeply and genuinely. Yeah, and also congratulations. Um,
Thank you.
oh,
Thanks.
yes. So,
It's exciting, nerve-wracking, but
yeah.
exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Tell us about Anything is Possible. Where did your journey begin and what's unfolded since?
So, as I started thinking about this and getting ready for this and kind of what I was going to talk about, and like you said, really in the pre-work, kind of unpacking, I must thank you for the opportunity I've had to reflect because we don't really take time to stop and do that. And so I've really kind of learned a bit about myself and this journey to kind of prepare for talking to you tonight. But so the chapter I'm in right now, Anything is Possible, I realize has been this recurring theme of my whole life. So I became an elementary teacher over 25 years ago, and I've loved every minute of it. I love education. I've never regretted for a day becoming a teacher. I still love it, and everything was going great in my career. I was teaching third grade in elementary, and then third, fourth, and fifth those grades, and I'd been a teacher for over 10 years, and I loved it. No bumps in the road, and everything was going great. And then along came a student who forever changed my life. Because first, she came in as a fifth grader, lower than any other student I'd ever had. She was basically a non reader. She was kind of stuck between kindergarten, first grade-ish reading level, and I had never dealt with that before. But my core belief at the time and still to this day, and this is one of the things I've realized in reflection, this is something that's been my core belief all along. All means all. And I believe there wasn't a child I couldn't reach. And I believe that we can reach every single child. So I just would not accept she could not learn to read. And I started asking for help. And that put me on this path to understand why. Why could she not understand? Because she was so smart and she was so bright. And I'm not kidding. She was the one that I left on the note. If I was ever absent, talk to her. Like go to her. She always sat on the front row because she could basically teach the class for me. But so I just couldn't figure this out. And now I know what I did not know then. I found out that it was dyslexia. But I couldn't find the answer, and I was asking, and I got so frustrated. And I had never been that frustrated or that challenged in my educational career. And I began to think I was failing her. And it became a very emotional journey for me. So you're probably going to like this part, but I finally found the answer in my close friend in the building, and her name's also Angie, and she was the speech language pathologist, Artie. So I went to the speech language pathologist in frustration. We had had our other benchmark, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And it's the first time I'd really opened up to Angie, our speech path. And I'm telling her about this. And so she starts talking to me all about probably what's going on. And then she says, we can do a diagnostic assessment. And I've never heard of that. And she said, and we can find the gaps, and then you can figure out what to do to close these gaps. And it was like she was speaking a foreign language to me. And I thought, I'm the educator, I'm the teacher. Why do I not know these things? And so we did the diagnostic survey. And so I found out that this student was stuck kind of on that progression of literacy skills. She was stuck in phonemic awareness. And I was so embarrassed to admit to Angie, the speech path, that I had never heard of phonemic awareness. And at this point, I have not only had a degree in education, I have now got a master's degree in administration. I also had a minor from college in language and literacy. And I'd never heard the word phony. So I kind of became outraged, and it put me on this quest that no teacher should have to go through this or feel this way. And I made it my life's work that day. I looked at Angie and I said, I'm going to spend my days figuring this out and telling every single teacher I know about it. And so I started that work, and that put me really on the journey that I realized in unpacking this for this story, for this time with you, that put me to what I'm doing now. And right after that, within about a month, I met a lady who would forever change my life. And her name was Dr. Vicki Gibson. And she introduced me to Dr. Jan Hasbrook, two leading experts in the field of literacy. And, in reflection, I realized that I met them because due to reading first. But at the time, I had no idea. I just thought they were out consultants working with schools. And so they taught me all about something that I had never heard about, this body of research. And that this body of research was sitting over here, and there was this disconnect between the research and teachers, and I just couldn't understand it. And I went to Dr. Gibson that day after she spoke, and I said, I'm going to do every single bit of this. I'm going to learn to implement it in my room because I believe all can learn. I haven't been able to reach all, and I'm going to do that now. I promise you, I'm going to do that now. And she said, I believe you. Angie, I believe you. I can just tell. I can feel it. I believe you. She took me under her wing and mentored me. And so that not only taught me what I needed to know, it also allowed me to then have the opportunity to start working with some teachers. But she sent me a great gift in the mail to kind of start this journey with her. And it was a couple of books. Yeah. And the first one was Anita Archer and Charles Hughes' Explicit Instruction. I've read that book multiple times. I made all these notes in it. And then John Hattie's book, Visible Learning and Visible Learning for Teachers. And so those two books literally changed my life. And Dr. Gibson had attached a little handwritten note to it and said, your task, your job, if you will, is to take these and not just read them, Figure out how to implement them, because that's what teachers need to know, and that's what's missing in our schools today. Figure out what this sounds like and what this looks like, and how you do this, what you say out of your mouth to your students. And so that's what I became passionate about. And that journey changed not only my life, my career, it forever changed my students' lives, because my data increased and I taught that student how to read. And I'm proud to say she's now a librarian, and she reads
Oh,
each week
yeah.
to students in the community and shares her love of reading with them. But my classroom and my students were never the same.
Yeah.
So I began then to share that research with others. And then that led me to become an instructional coach, where I was able to coach other teachers and share with them that foundation that none of us got in college and that we had not had till then. And so to teach them the foundational knowledge about the science of reading, and not just the science. We need to know that core foundation, but also what do we do with it? How do we implement it? So the explicit instruction, the systematic instruction on how to design an explicit lesson, how to deliver an explicit lesson. John Hattie's evidence-based practices, the ones that we can do that have the highest impact on our students' lives. And to actually take that research and what it looks like in the classroom. So then that led me to become an elementary principal. And so very early, just a couple of months into my journey, I find out that the school, based upon the last 3 years, had become one of the lowest schools in the state of Missouri. And we were going to need to do a dramatic turnaround in literacy, because we only had 13% of our students who are proficient in literacy. So once again, I reach out to Dr. Jan Hasbrook, and she connects me with a literacy consultant, Pati Montgomery, the founder of Schools Cubed, who worked with leaders. And so she came, I had met her and I had known her, but she came on site and she taught me something. And then here I am, a principal. And again, I find out something and again, I had this aha moment in preparing for this. Here I am again in a role, and I find out something that I don't know anything about. And I had a master's degree and a specialist degree in administration, and I never heard what Pati Montgomery told me. And it was this missing piece, that highly effective schools have systems and structures in them. And it's the systems and structures that drive the work. And that's the difference in a high performing and low performing school. And again, I became a bit outraged of how is it that I've done principal training and I've got this degree, and how is it that I know nothing about this? So then I developed this passion about every leader needs to know this. And if we do these things, and if this is possible, and it is, that we can reach 95% of students, why is every school just not doing that? And so I thought, I'm going to just spend my days helping schools, teachers, and leaders know that. So we began the hard, the challenging, but the most rewarding work I've done in my career of building the systems and structures with one goal, one common goal of reaching literacy for all. And what we did is we embraced that work as a staff, and we developed a growth mindset, and we said all means all. And we are going, anything is possible. And we will not meet a child that we won't be able to teach to read. And so we had this motto, basically, that if a child walks through that door, and if they're ours, and if they come to our school, then by golly, they're going to learn to read, and not just read, but read well. And we literally threw out the word impossible, throughout the idea of impossible, and we just focused on the growth at all times. And so I realized I've always, even since a little kid, had a growth mindset, even though I didn't know what it was called,
Yeah.
But when people would say, I was told a lot in my life that I couldn't do things, or that you can't, or that you won't. And I kind of thought, watch me, and I will. And so as a team, we came together and we were able to make dramatic growth, because one, the teachers were given the knowledge, the foundational piece that they needed. They were also taught how to put that research into place. And then we went deep into the nuances of education, and it was how to, bring out the rich oral language in the younger grades and the foundational pieces in K2, and then all of Scarborough's rope,
Mm.
and all that deep comprehension and the rich vocabulary and explicit systematic vocabulary in our school. And so then we just started reaping this dramatic change in data because we were
Yeah.
constantly, keeping an eye on the data. We were tracking it constantly. And then we began to start saying 100%. We're at this 13 and we start saying 100%. And our first 100 was that 100% of students in kindergarten we're at the 50th percentile or higher on letter naming fluency, letter sound fluency, phoneme segmentation. That group of students, they roll into second grade. And then lo and behold, by the end of the year, because they had such a strong foundation and they continued in first and second to get this rich instruction, high content, high expectations for these students, rich text, rich content, and continuing with the foundational skills that they needed in literacy, strong phonics program. And so then they exit second grade, and it became kind of the norm that 100% of them would leave second grade reading at or above the 50th percentile. And then they would roll into third, fourth, and fifth grade. And oh my gosh, what we were able to do with them with comprehension and text structure and genres and all those rich pieces. I'm thinking right now, I'm just picturing Scarborough's rope and the upper strands. And so we were able to turn the school around in a very short amount of time and make dramatic change. I ended up being there 6 years. And so the beauty of the systems and structures piece is then you can change out the players and the work continues. That the work wasn't happening because I was there, because I was principal. The work was happening because the team was committed to the work. And so then a member of the team, our building leadership team, stepped up. I then took a superintendent position. She stepped up, became principal, and that work still continues at that school. So then I go to superintendent, and I've realized I really went out of the classroom to instructional coach to principal to superintendent. Now I've realized because it gave me the opportunity to reach more and to have a larger impact on a greater number. And so then it was to take everything that we had learned from all of our journeys and then to do it at a district-wide level with a K-12 district, 4K through 12th grade district, and to do the exact same work. Give those teachers the foundational piece that they needed, the research, the science, but then teach them, set up the systems and structures, the evidence-based practices, how to teach, explicit instruction, and all of those rich practices from John Hattie that have the greatest effect sizes. And we started doing that. And again, we had great gains. So one of the examples is in the beginning, because the students in middle school and high school had not had this in elementary, then there's this disconnect and they are not reading at grade level. And so on our first time we assessed those students, over 60% of them needed an intervention and they were well below grade level. But in a short time, just in a year and a half, in 3 benchmarks, we had that down to 5%, from over 60 down to 5%. And simply because of the intervention to close those skill gaps, look at the assessments, find their skill gaps, close those gaps, give them the instruction they needed, teach them to read, and then get them into a room and start teaching them all the rich vocabulary and comprehension and all of that. So then that helped me develop this passion through being an administrator and superintendent to helping all leaders become instructional leaders. And because we know now from research, and one of the greatest pieces I love is the Wallace Foundation that says it's the instructional leaders who have the highest effect size in their schools because they're having those instructional conversations with their students. And so, it was the journey that Pati Montgomery and I had that we talked often about writing a book. And then as a superintendent, the opportunity was presented to us. So then we wrote a book and it's called It's Possible. And we kind of start talking about that. And then I found my life had come to this sort of crossroads. What was I going to do? I became where I, in the role of superintendent, was being faced with challenges I had never been faced with before. And I thought, I've got a decision to make. So what do I do? And I realized you've actually had this dream
Mm.
of consulting full time. You've kind of played with it, you've done around with it. And now with the book coming out and where you are right now, and this passion is so strong, this is the time. And I'd held back, I think, due to fear,
Yeah.
after really reflecting on it. And so I'm like, you know what? I have said for years, and I've had this belief, anything is possible. It's time to make that, it's time to make that possible. And so I put all my fear off over to the side and embraced it, and started started this company. And now I'm pursuing this lifelong dream. And it has been a passion of mine. And so I'm now doing the consulting work full time. And it's hard to not get emotional, but it's literally filling my life with joy every single day. I, this week, have been in schools every single day this week, in classrooms, working with teachers, modeling, modeling explicit vocabulary, showing teachers how to go deep into text with the teachers, and giving teachers feedback and listening to them, asking for more feedback and wanting that growth, and seeing the growth this time from the last time I was there. And it has nothing to do with me. It's not anything that's about me. It's just when we give teachers the knowledge, it's not anything that Angie Hanlon's doing, trust me. It's just that we give teachers what we need to know. It's what all those years ago I was so frustrated that I did not know. And that's when we give teachers and leaders the ability to reach what's possible. 95%, and to truly change the lives of their students. So that's kind of what led me to the journey I'm on right now. And that's the chapter that I'm on right now, where anything is possible. And I am now just deeply committed, deeply committed and passionate about spending the rest of my career, spending time getting this message out to teachers and leaders, and doing anything I can to help them not only feel that success of what's possible, but to never have the frustration that I felt
Yeah.
as an educator. Yeah.
Oh, that the magnitude of your journey, Angie. I think one of the things about reflection is that you think about what you've been through and you articulate it, and it appears to come to be expressed in a neat package. And we know it's more than, it's always more than the neat package. There is so many trials and errors and challenges and tests that
So many.
we go through. But I'd love to take you back to being a novice and when you connected with Angie, the speech and
Yes.
language pathologist. So I'll have a three-part question for you.
Okay, sure.
My question is, when you first connected with Angie, you spoke about her talking about phonemic awareness and you not knowing of that. Were there other things within your discussion that resonated well with you and got you thinking about, oh, this makes sense, and why haven't we been taught that? That's question one. Part two and part three is about the two books you received, Anita Archer and John Hattie. When you started to implement things from each book, tell us about some of your aha moments. And by that, not just the implementation of it, but why did you choose to implement that particular point that they
Okay.
talked of?
Okay. And I love that you said aha moments. So I have always said, it's a phrase I've used,
Yeah.
aha moments. And even when I would train and I'd ask my students, have you had aha moments? So when I put the company to get the name, we tried 24 names and they were all taken.
Oh,
So finally I'm like, my husband said, just take your name. No one else has your name. So
yeah.
we did Angela Hanlin and Associates, AHA, and it's aha.
Oh,
So
oh
I'm
my
like, well,
goodness.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
so
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but so sorry, I just had to
Wow.
share that for a minute because now
That's
it
great.
aha, I've said it my whole life, aha moments, and now it's taken on a different meaning for me. So that conversation with Angie, I sat there and I was able to be, there was that friendship and that trust there. So I was able to completely be vulnerable, and I look back and in reflecting on that, I don't know that I could have done that had that been a conversation like with a principal,
Mm.
because I probably would have been scared to admit, like, I don't know anything you're talking
Yeah.
about, And so I'm like, my very first question to her though, Artie, was, how do you know that and I don't?
Mm.
And why do you know that and I don't? And she started explaining to me all about language. And she started explaining to me about that students need to hear it
Mm.
before they speak it. And then we went into speech to print. Okay, so then we start talking about that. And then phonological awareness. So she literally sat there at that table and just did a mini lesson with me on that. And I had always, just because I didn't know why, but I just thought that for vocabulary, I noticed that if I broke the vocabulary words into syllables, my students learned them better.
Mm.
But I did not know why that was. And so then that made me start really studying. And so then I learned the research, but it left me with the question, why are teachers not talking about this? And I placed a call to my university. I called them, the
Mm.
education department, and I'm like, why are we not talking about this? And I challenged them, to change that. Like, why are we not having that? But it made me one start digging and start studying and start and I really started looking into this, and she put me on the path of what to look into. Okay, so she gave me the great resources and started looking at, and like speech and the simple view of reading that students must be able to decode, but there's also that language comprehension piece, and all of this was new to me. So I started looking at that, but then what that made me do is then when I went back into my classroom, I started looking at everything through a different lens, if that made sense. Because then I'm like, oh, I've got to change the way I'm teaching this. And so then I was so hungry about the quest of, okay, how do I teach this so that every single skill gap, or that every single skill set is developed in my students? Because when I went back into my room after I started learning these things, I realized we've got a problem. The majority of my students don't have this either. It's not only that I didn't know it, my students didn't know it. And my students, when I started assessing and doing these little mini assessments and these screeners, I'm like, well, I've got a serious problem. It wasn't just that one student, it was a lot of students in there. And then that caused me to start doing differentiated instruction, because I had so many students on so many different levels, and I was doing it. And I didn't know what I did not know. I wasn't doing it completely correct, because I was mainly giving them all the same instruction and kind of doing different activities, more like differentiated exercises, differentiated practice activities.
Mm.
And then, like I said, right on the heels of all of this, God's timing is just amazing. Right on the heels of this, I meet Dr. Vicki Gibson, and then she teaches me that differentiated instruction. She said, Angie, it's the instruction that's different. And at the small group, it's those students are getting the instruction that they need to close their specific skill gap that their data says. All those sub skills, when we do those literacy assessments, those reading assessments, all those sub skills, I started looking at my data for the very first time for each student to find those gaps. And so that's kind of what that did. And so it did so much to me on so many different levels. Um, But then about the book, so Anita Archer, that's the book I read first, Explicit Instruction. And I had, again, an aha moment of this is how we all need to teach. And there is a graphic in that book that says, I get I'm such a dork about some of this stuff. I get goosebumps even thinking about it already, but it says how well we teach equals how well they learn.
Yeah.
And so then after reading John Hattie's Visible Learning, that the learning becomes visible, I had the biggest aha of my career. Now, up until that one, the biggest aha I had was when Vicki Gibson said, differentiated instruction is the instruction that's different. That was life-changing for me because I had been doing that incorrectly. And I went back the very next day after she trained us, and I changed what I did at small group the very next day. I could barely sleep that night because I thought, this is what I'm doing the next day tomorrow with my students. And I changed it from then on. But then I realized from John Hattie, I had been looking at the instruction. Everything of my teaching that point had been all about my teaching. Yeah. How was I teaching it? How was I teaching it? Was I delivering it in a fun manner? And I really had heard about engagement and the word explicit instruction, but I didn't deeply understand it until I read that book. I thought it was more about animated and excited delivery and engagement. And it's the explicit design of that lesson, and Anita Archer explains in that book that if you can't deliver an explicit lesson if you haven't designed an explicit lesson, and all the different ways we're going to generate the student responses, choral responses. And I had students raise their hands, one student at a time. I stopped all of that. There were no raised hands, and I started doing a focus wall, and it was all this rich, explicit instruction. And I became more excited about my instruction than I'd ever been before. Yeah. And I thought it was going to stop there. But my students became more excited and more engaged in the learning than they had ever been as well, too. And so I had a student one day that said, and I had a very open classroom culture because as I'm doing this work with John Hattie, I told my class, I am learning something new and you're going to see me teach differently. And I need feedback from you. I need to know if it's working. And I have failed you. I've never asked you if it's worked before. And I apologize. And now I'm going to teach and I'm going to ask you if you learned it. And if you didn't learn it, I need you to tell me that. And I'm going to be the teacher that you need me to be. I'm not just going to turn the page in my manual. I am going to change. I'm going to be what you need me to be when you need me to be it. And so one of the students said, so we've just had this explicit vocabulary and we've talked about the genre and we're getting ready. They were standing up doing all of that. And so they're ready to sit down and they're getting the books open and we're getting ready to dig into text. And one of my students says to me, may I give you some feedback? And I'm like, I would love that.
Yeah.
Yes. What is it? And she said, this is so fun. And I'm learning faster than I've ever learned it.
Wow.
And I'm like, really? And she said, so it was about the vocabulary and with the motions, this explicit model of vocabulary, using it in a sentence. We were doing Freire model with it, breaking it down, synonyms and antonyms and examples and non-examples of the words and all this rich discussion about it. And she said, and it's so fun, but I'm remembering it and I'm learning it faster than I've ever learned it before. And so I then immediately from then on, every student had a 100 on the vocab assessment from then on. But she said, we are not only learning so much more, you're telling us what we're going to learn, and then we're learning it, and then we're telling you that we've learned it. And so she said, we are talking every day about what we're learning. And so she began to give me feedback, and the students, that first class that I did this with, and I've stayed in touch with a lot of them because we all kind of made that discovery together. I questioned text differently. And so the environment of the class, they would just stop and say, I don't understand that. Can you go back? We need more of that. And so it, I say all the time, it not only changed my career, it changed them as well. And so, but I was open with them and I began to be even more explicit with them about what I was learning. And so John Hattie, though, the number one thing about that was I found that list of effect sizes was life changing for me. If 0.4 is 1 year's growth, why would I just settle for that? As a teacher, why would we settle for 0.4 1 year's growth? If we have an effect size of 1.4, and that's creating and developing assessment capable learners, where that we create a learner who's capable of assessing where they are, setting goals, and then they set goals for themselves. I set that up in my room, and it was life-changing. My room took on a different atmosphere than it had ever had before, because the students really took and owned their own learning, and they kind of became in control of their own learning. I mean, now I was still explicitly teaching, but they were challenging me for more all the time. And metacognition and the deep level, we went to the deepest level of learning we had ever learned. That led me to the next book I read, and later on, the work of Doug Fisher and text-dependent questions. And I learned how to go through the 4 phases of close reading with the students. And Artie, I wanted to go back and get all of my previous students, because I thought I've never gone to the depth in text that I was able to then start going to with the students. And I'd never gone to the depth of the learning or the rigor of the learning after that work. And so that's when then the students became so excited. They were telling other students about their learning. And then they would tell other teachers about the learning. And so then teachers started saying, hey, and the teacher that ended up, she was my closest friend, but she ended up, when I went to superintendent, she became principal of the building. She's the first teacher that came to me and said, okay, what are you doing? And again, it's that being vulnerable. And, like I was with Angie, and she came to me and she said, we're spending the same amount of time teaching.
Yes.
We're spending the same exact amount of time prepping. You and I were so similar in our delivery, and and we both love teaching, we both love learning. Why are you getting a different result? And I'm like, you've got to come in here and watch it, because it's not me, it's these practices. And so that was what Anita Archer's book did, and that's what John Hattie's book did. And it just took instruction to a level that I had never been able to take it to. And I had kind of wrapped that up.
Okay. Go for it, Angie.
So I was just wrapping up and saying that that's really what those 2 books did for me. And I can honestly say I understood instruction then better than I'd ever understood it before. By doing that and by trying those things and by trying those practices. Metacognition, before John Hattie, I'd never heard about that. Deeply thinking about and teaching those students to deeply think about. I had never been able to take them to the level of making inferences and drawing conclusions and all of those things. And so as a principal, I took that book. So as a teacher, I took that book and just started using those practices, those strategies that had the highest effect sizes. But when I became a principal, and our students were so far behind, and if the 0.4 is 1-year growth, we had a faculty meeting in our library, and I said, we can't do 1 year's growth. If our students are anywhere from 2 to 4 years behind, we've got to do these practices. So we took, I should have had my book right here. If I was at home, I'd have it right here, because it's always on my desk. But we literally took a line on where he lists the 150 effect sizes. We drew a line 0.5 and 0.65 and higher. And so we're doing everything above that. And those were the practices that we strategically became really, really good at. Everything from explicit instruction up. And those were the things that we implemented in the room because we wanted to get the most growth out of our students. And every student in my classroom, and then as a principal, and then also as superintendent, every single student in the building had a goal. They had a goal card. They tracked their own goals. They had little bar graphs or line graphs where they would plot their data. And it was all about then I would teach, get feedback from them, but it was pulling them into the instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, and I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
And I had to really give myself some grace because it's really hard not to be just consumed by guilt. But I had to give myself some grace of, well, you didn't know what you didn't know. But then when you knew better, you changed it and you did better. But I realized that I felt like I had been teaching at students and teaching to them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't with them. And when I brought them on to that learning journey and we were all in it together and I put them in control of the learning. And I'm not talking about like inquiry-based learning, but I'm saying giving them a goal, setting a clear learning intention on the board. This is what I intend for you to learn by the end of this hour or by the end of this lesson. And then the success criteria, this is all from John Hattie, the success criteria, have you learned it in an I can statement? If so, then can I? I mean, I can do this. If so, can I at the end of the lesson? And assessing whether or not they could. And then figuring out every single day, assessing their learning. And that's what teachers need to know. And, and that's the information when they don't know it. Again, it's like I felt, you don't know what you don't know. And the same thing about leaders. When Patti Montgomery said that to me, I'm like, I've been in leadership training. Why have I never heard this phrase, systems and structures, and these 6 systems? Where is this? Why does every leader not know this? And even the 95%, Jan Hasbrook's the first person I've heard say that if that was possible. I remember the day and where I was sitting in that conference when I heard her say that. And I wrote, how you have your PowerPoint slides? And it was that slide and those lines. I wrote on that, why don't we all just do that?
Yeah.
Why don't we all just do that?
Yeah.
And, and that's where I'm at right now with where we are in literacy, especially in the United States. I mean, our NAEP scores have come out. We've dropped another 2 points, 31%. And I look at the literacy rates and I look at where they are versus where we can be. And I'm still find myself saying, you know what? Why don't we all just do that?
Yeah.
And that's the work I'm trying to passionately help get out. And there's so many. I'm not anything special, but there's so many people that are doing that now. And I'm thinking there is a movement to it. I'm so thankful to give teachers the empowerment that they need to go in and give that level of instruction to their students. Because another thing I didn't understand was I didn't understand rigor. You hear rigor a lot. And I think when people hear the word rigor, we think hard, we think challenging.
Yeah.
Rigor is if the instruction is here and the standards are here and our students are here, it's not teaching down to them, which I think I probably thought that at one time in reflection. And I think I probably lowered the expectations to that. It's taking them there. It's taking them there with our instruction. Our instruction is the thing that takes them there. We never lower the expectations because it goes back to that anything is possible and all means all, and we can get them there. So I got carried away a bit there. So I apologize.
That is absolutely incredible, Angie. It's got me thinking about, okay, one thing I'll do is I'll aim to summarize, but tell me if I've got any points wrong. Your teaching practices changed by understanding the knowledge base, understanding what the students required to be able to technically read effectively. That was through the SLP that you talked to. Within the books, you saw the practices that were underscored and highlighted what is explicit instruction. How do you differentiate that instruction rather than having different activities? Um, and in John Hattie's, thinking about the effect sizes, but not just that, pulling together student feedback, their metacognition, creating an open class culture for the back and forth feedback, goal
Yes.
setting, and talking about. I really loved the point you said. Your student, the one that was giving you feedback, said you would tell them what they were going to learn, you taught them that, and then they assessed their learning. Did they learn that? And so that
Yes.
was almost the
Yeah.
routine of the
So
class.
I now call that the what and the how.
Yeah.
So it's the what teachers need to know.
Yes.
You know, the science of reading, the science, those
Mhm,
foundational core
mhm,
components of the literacy
mhm,
block, you know, the big five, those core components and all of the research there, you know, and how to teach phonics and all of that. So that's that foundational base I needed. But then also as a teacher, we need to know the
mhm,
how the practices for then how to go in our room and deliver that.
mhm,
And this is something that, if I could point out, I feel like there is this huge movement out in the science of reading.
mhm.
But I feel like if we stop there, we aren't going to reach everybody. Because if we stop with, and that's the knowledge base that the teachers need, and Lord knows we've got to give it to them. But if we stop just there and don't go on further
Yeah.
and teach them how to implement that at the level that we need to implement that and to the rigor that we can take our students to with the evidence-based practices to get them there, then we're failing them. That it's really all of that together that we have to have. It's the what and the how of how to do it.
A
Yeah.
100%. And something that I haven't really thought of, or I've thought about it, but never really made the connection until today, until you talked about what is rigor, actually having that expectation, but bringing the students to that expectation. We know that there is a massive gap between research to practice in the education field,
Mhm.
but not necessarily understanding how to read research, what practices are effective. But you think about the classroom, and you've got to be able to read the research, and that research is the students in front of you.
Yes.
What are they showing you in their data? Analyzing that data, intervening upon that data, and then reassessing to actually see the growth. And that is literally what you would do in a research study.
Yeah.
Is what are the,
And
yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't
no.
mean to interrupt. And in time,
Yes.
and doing it in real
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
in the classroom right then and not waiting till the next benchmark,
Yes.
which is what so many schools do. You know, you do a
Mhm.
beginning of your benchmark and then they wait to get that middle of your benchmark.
Yeah.
Half the year's gone.
Yes.
But it's teaching teachers how to collect that data, get that feedback. The real time right then, did they learn it? And if not, what am I going to do with my instruction?
Yes.
You know, is it reteaching? It's going back to that teacher toolbox, is
Yeah.
how I always explain to teachers. And do I pick up modeling again? Do I go back to guided practice? Like,
Yeah.
what is the piece that I go back to? What's the skill gap then? What is the skill gap or the hole, if you
Yeah.
will, in their learning, the hole? And then how can I fill that
Yeah.
hole to get them there? And it's so complex. And you think about that. And this is where I get really passionate because teachers are working so hard and
Mhm.
it's taking so much time. They often don't have the time to go do all this learning ourselves. That's where I feel it's the responsibility of us as leaders to get to bring all of that to them. That on the job training at school while they're there and coaching and supporting them is what
Yeah.
I that was my aim that was my goal as a leader, to then coach and support teachers and take them to that level, because they don't have time to go study in that. Now, I will say though, education is a career where we're constantly learning more, and we constantly have to be aware of the new research because it changes, and we've got to be, a lifelong learner and be looking at it. But two, I feel that as leaders, we have to be responsible and hold ourselves accountable for bringing the right information and the right knowledge base to our teachers, so that they can then go in the room and take that to their students and empower their students. And then we in turn empower our teachers as well.
Absolutely. And that idea of how your journey has unfolded from a classroom teacher to an instructional coach to a principal to a superintendent, like it's as it was meant to be. But these are the pieces where you've gone from being a teacher to leadership, and you're filtering down that information, filtering down those practices, you're filtering down the high impact strategies and creating those systems and structures that you talked about.
Yes. And, and building the school and the system that I didn't have, and that as a teacher that I didn't have. And so then knowing it, and and giving teachers the support that I didn't have, and bringing the knowledge base, and being the type of leader that can do that. And and then two, the systems and structures piece is the beauty of that work is, when you do that, you can leave a school and a system better than you found it. And then the leaders can change out, but the students' learning never is impacted. Because teachers come and go, leaders come and go. But if the number one goal is student learning, then by setting up the systems and structures, and by equipping all teachers to be highly effective, then every single student, regardless of whose class they're in, regardless of what school they're in, regardless of who their principal is or who their superintendent is, then you're setting up a system of success so that the students, and it truly is a student-centered culture. It's a student-centered culture where the students are always getting exactly what they need to reach their highest potential, where anything is possible for them, and all means all, that they can all learn.
Absolutely. I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into systems and structures. When you started thinking about it, the seed was placed when Pati mentioned it.
Yes.
Written it
Yes.
down. Somewhere here. All schools should have that. When you became a principal, what are some of explain to me the difference between what a system is and what a structure is, and how did you start to think about that and implement it in your school?
Oh, a system is something that's in place. So think about in the book, and how Pati talks about it, think about it as like cogs in a wheel.
Yeah.
And so when all the cogs are going, it's this continuous cycle, if you will. It's the system that it's continuous improvement, and it just keeps going. One of the systems that I think is easy to kind of wrap our mind around is the system of database decision making. Because then you have a systematic method of collecting the data. So you have a beginning of year benchmark, middle of year, end of year, and then you have a system for how you're going to analyze that data. You don't just collect it. Right after it, you meet. You have a data team meeting. The very next week, after all the data has been collected, you meet with teachers. There's a system for how you analyze that data and look at it. There's a system then for what you do. You then sort that out, and which students need intervention, and how are we going to group the students, and then you set goals on that. And so that is something in system that it just continuously cycles through. And once the system starts, it never changes again. Okay. I mean, it's just continuous work, continuous improvement, collaboration. She and I talked about that this morning on a webinar with people about the book. Collaboration is the same way. I mean, we tell teachers to collaborate, but do we have a system for collaboration that this is how you will collaborate? And then this is how we'll collaborate every single month. And it's systematic because it's continuous. And it's this continuous cycle of improvement. And you get better at it all the time. But then now there can be a structure. A structure is something of how you do something. So like database decision making, that's the system. But then you have to have within that system a structure of intervention. So, how will you structure intervention lessons? Who will provide the intervention? What intervention will students receive? Where will they go? What hour will they go? You have an intervention schedule. So then you structure that. But the systems there are 6 key systems that we write about in the book It's Possible. And so, but those are the things that once those get moving in the school, that it's a continuous system of improvement. Does that make sense?
It does.
Just the continuous system of improvement. Yes. And then the structures, you can structure something so that it helps that system keep going, but the system is the piece that's there. And then once that's in place, it almost seems like then you stop thinking about, oh, we have to set up this system.
Yeah.
And it becomes, this is just how we do school.
Yeah.
This is just how we do school here. And you forget that, oh, this is something we actually set up. No, this is just what drives our work. This system drives our work. And this is how we do every month of school. You know, you get in that data system and it just takes you from one week to the next because you've got progress monitoring and then you're doing your check-in meetings on that. Are they making progress? That rolls you into the next benchmark. And then you're seeing if you've had growth, you've then set up progress monitoring. And it's a system that just continuously repeats itself.
Thank you so much for explaining it to me so clearly. I've talked about systems and structures, but until today, I haven't been able to completely distinguish them.
Well, I'm glad that helped. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm glad that helped.
And that system is the big picture, but how interrelated it is with structures as well. While structures is almost the nuanced pieces of the entire big picture, how important it is to know whether it's a structure that fits within intervention or a structure that actually fits within your tier 1 classroom space.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
To actually think about what do we need to do, who is going to do that, when, how frequently.
How. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. As
You're
we
welcome.
wrap up this discussion, is there something that I haven't asked you that you've wanted to share? No, I just haven't gone there.
I just want to throw out one quick thing. When I was reflecting on this, there have been so many challenges that have come my way. And there have been people throughout that have said, you know, you can't do something, you can't accomplish something. And so I think a lot of people maybe would have given up. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I should have at some point. I don't know. But looking at those challenges, then we just have, when we're faced with something that we can't, it is having grit, it's having resilience, it's staying with a problem. And in thinking about that, as some of your questions that you kind of posed to me to really get me to thinking about this, it's not that I know more, it's not that I do more or anything like that. I think it's that I'm willing to stay with a problem longer. I am willing to stay in that I don't know to I know, that productive struggle phase that's there. I don't give up in that productive struggle phase. And so because if you believe that anything's possible and you believe that somehow by growth mindset, you know, it's not that I can't get there. It's just I haven't gotten there yet. That you'll stay with the course and you'll stay with that. And how empowering it is if we can teach that to our students and if we can set that up in schools. But it's really about setting that goal and going for it. But one of the things that you had asked me to think about is kind of like the 5 key takeaways. If I could just say those super quick, share those quickly. One, we have to make sure that all teachers everywhere, if they're a teacher, no matter what continent they're teaching on, no matter where they are in the world, we've got to give them the knowledge base to have the foundation to teach their students and to take their students to the level that all students can get to. And I feel like if we don't build that knowledge base and if we don't provide them that, we failed them that. Then we've got to also, that's kind of the what, but we have to teach them the explicit instruction, because explicit instruction, systematic instruction, that's the key. And then give them the evidence-based practices to teach them how to really get the results that research has proven is possible. And to teach them to be a practitioner. We don't have to be the researcher. As educators, we don't. We just have to be the practitioner and learn how to put it in our classrooms. And then to really accept all means all. And we've got to embrace that education. And I feel like this is what we do. All means all is a great thing. It's on websites. I mean, I have it on a t-shirt, for goodness sake. You know, literacy for all. And it's catchy. But we need to do all means all exclamation mark. But this is what we do. We get caught up and we do all means all, comma, but they have an IP, but they're living in trauma, but they're free lunch, but they have a learning disability, but they have dyslexia. No, stop. All means all. I'm probably going to get a little emotional there. Sorry, but all means all. And we've got to stop putting a comma after that, put an exclamation mark, and keep the level of expectations up, because every child can get there. And I tell you, they will rise to meet whatever expectations we set. The fourth one is that instructional leaders, they can transform literacy in every single school. It doesn't matter the point they're at right now. It doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to stay there. Instructional leaders are the people who can transform literacy for everybody. They can transform the lives of their students. They can transform literacy in the building. They can transform their schools. They can transform and empower their teachers. And that fifth and final thought is just that anything is possible. And what would happen in education, and I guess just life in general, but already what would happen if we completely threw out the idea of impossible? It makes me think of that Audrey Hepburn quote from Audrey Hepburn, "Nothing is impossible. The word itself says I'm possible." What would happen if we all came together and embraced all means all, and embrace that anything is possible, and we can get every single person there, and that we can do this no matter what we set our mind to. We can do this. Develop a growth mindset. It's not that we can't do it. It's just that we haven't done it yet. Set that goal and just go for it together, collectively, all of us in this journey together. Learn from each other, support each other, celebrate each other. And my gosh, I think of the power that we can have in education. It's amazing.
100%. And I resonate so deeply with it. And thinking about that collective pool, but also understanding within the collective pool, everybody has their own thoughts and experiences and
Yes.
unique set of skills that they bring to the table, but being open to that dialogue and again,
Yes.
working together to,
Yes.
because,
Oh, sorry.
no,
Go ahead. You go ahead.
because
And meeting, go ahead. Go ahead.
because at the end of the day, it's our students that we as adults are working for, and we need to work with them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's meeting not only the students where they are, but where the teachers, it's meeting the teachers where they are, and that differentiated coaching and support for them as well. Meeting the leaders where they are, and having that grace and extending that, and just meeting them where they are. I love Laura Stewart says, no blaming, no shaming. Just meet everybody where we are and
Mm.
then taking them, like in
Yes.
rigor,
Yes.
taking them to where we want them to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we're all lifelong learners. No matter how much you've learned, you've always started somewhere. You've always made a million and one mistakes and you've learned
Yes.
from it. That's the thing. We're all going to make mistakes. Even moving forward, we're going to make mistakes, but it's acknowledging them and building a culture around mistakes are okay. We aim to do that within our classrooms. We're just
Yes.
built a classroom.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And doing it, as teachers and in our schools and in life too. And just okay. I mean, mistakes are proof that we're trying new things, and
Yeah.
mistakes are proof that we're learning.
Mm,
And there's no shame in that. And
mm,
but allowing people to be open and honest and vulnerable enough to say, because I mean, I don't have it all together, and I'm still constantly asking. I don't know it all, and I'm constantly still learning and reaching out.
mm.
But it's just, having that environment that's saying it's okay to
Yes.
not know, and we'll learn together, and we'll do this together, and we'll work together.
Mm,
We'll support each other until we all get there. And it's a learning journey. It really is. We're all at different parts in
yeah.
this journey. It's a beautiful journey, and we can all get there. We
Yeah.
just have to look at where we are
Yeah.
and then go there together.
Absolutely. Angie, thank you so much for taking the time, energy, and effort into sharing this chapter. It's been an incredible conversation. And I will get you to send me the links to your website, to your book,
Okay.
yours and
Okay.
his book.
Okay.
So it's all there for people to,
Thank
yeah,
you. That'd
yeah,
be wonderful.
that'd be
Okay.
great.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
for everybody that's listening, that's going to listen to this chapter, thank you so much. It's going to be available on Human Chapters YouTube channel, Human Chapters podcast, and the Facebook page as well. Please share it. I'm never great at sharing it widely, but each conversation is so unique, so valuable. Someone will get something out of it. So,
Thank you for this opportunity and the reflection time that it gave me in preparing for this. I thank you so much. I think we all should just stop and reflect. It's kind of how we've gotten to where we are. So thank you. And thank you for the beautiful work you're doing with these conversations.
you're
Thank
so
you for that.
you're so welcome, Angie.